Okay, welcome everyone. Looks like we've got quite a few folks in today, so we're going to go ahead and get started right on time. Today's webinar is going to be our change management session. So that means today we're going to be going over both owner or customer changes as well as subcontract changes. My name is Sarah. I'm going to be walking you through today, and we also have Ashley on the line. So she's going to be helping me monitor our Q&A. If you have questions along the way, please go ahead and drop those in the Q&A. Ashley will either get you answered via the chat through that Q&A, or we'll take some pauses along the way and she can bring up to us questions that may be applicable to the whole group. So you can see we're in our training database today. So we're going to be using the same project we've been using for all of our recent training webinars, which is this Jungle Cruise project. The project is already in progress, and we're going to be starting today by talking about an owner or a customer change. Now, that can be done from the contract tab, which is where we're going to start. I want you to know that you do have the capability to create owner changes as early as the request stage of a project. Now, I don't see a lot of scenarios where clients are using the change feature this early, but it is possible. Generally, if you're in request stage, you do have the capability to edit your original estimate and your original proposal rather than creating a change, but should you need to, it is available. Now, if at any point I need to create a change to my original contract, I would come in here and click New, and I'm going to see two options: Create Potential Change or Create Potential Change Order. Now, we're going to talk very carefully about the difference between the two because I know that terminology is pretty similar. So, create a potential change. A potential change, think of that as a single encapsulated proposal for a specific change to the project. A potential change order you can think of as a summary document, which is allowing you to wrap one or more potential changes into a single document for your customer to review and approve. Now, as we open a potential change, you're going to see that there's several different types of potential changes and several different reasons why we might create them. And then we'll follow that. Once we've created a sample potential change, we'll wrap that into a change order so you can see how the summary document operates. So I'm going to click Create Potential Change, and you're going to see a pop-up window with a set of steps. Now, this set of steps is going to look pretty similar to that new project setup form that you may have been using for our initial setup of a project, right? This is the same steps that you'd be familiar with for pre-construction. So a few things to keep in mind as we walk through. One, you will probably never go through your owner change process as quickly as I go through it today. It's designed to be something that you can jump in and work on and then hop back out, come back when you're ready. This may take days or weeks to prepare this potential change into a proposal document that you can send out. But that being said, all of these steps along the left-hand side are listed for the most part as optional. Even the cost estimate, which is not listed as optional, you'll see as we go along, really can be optional depending on the scenario. So the other thing to keep in mind is that you may or may not use every step on every potential change. I'm going to walk you through an example today where you use all of these because it's a convenient way for me to show you how all of them work. But in a real life scenario, you may be filling out only a couple of these steps for certain quick or simple changes. So that being said, let's go ahead and start walking through. The first step is scope details. Just like you would with a brand new project, we're going to create the scope. Think of this like creating a little mini project. Most of this is already filled in based on the original contract details. So there's really only a couple pieces that you need to pay particular attention to. The first one is the scope change name. We need to go ahead and give it a name that makes sense and helps us and any other involved parties understand what this change is. I'm going to go with my favorite example, upgrading lobby tile. This is not a drop-down. This is just my Google Chrome showing you what I've typed in the past. So this is a free field. You can type in any title that makes sense to you. The next thing to keep in mind is the change type. This is going to be crucial. We have two options: customer change and internal change. A customer change means that it needs to be presented to your customer. You're going to be sending the customer a proposal and they will be authorizing this change. That would be used for generally anything that's going to cause a change to the contract total. That means if you are increasing the contract total that the customer is going to pay, or you're extending some form of credit, might be authorizing the use of owner's contingency funds. There's a lot of scenarios there, but generally the way we think of it is if your customer needs to sign off on it, it would be a customer change. An internal change would be something that doesn't require customer approval, generally because it's not changing the value of the contract. So if this change doesn't carry a cost, or if all you're doing is something like uploading revised plans and specs, that would be an internal change. It's created for internal tracking only. I would also mention that some of our clients use internal changes to track budget adjustments. If you're familiar with the budget adjustment feature on the budget tab, you can make budget adjustments internally in the absence of a change, but some of our clients like to track those through these internal changes on the contract tab as well. So there are many different reasons why you might create a potential change here. And the reason you're creating it and the type of change you're creating is going to heavily influence which steps on the left-hand side you need to complete. For example, if I was making an internal change where all I'm doing is uploading some new drawings that should supersede some of my existing copies, I would select internal change. I might fill out step 1, step 3, and then go ahead and authorize the proposal. I wouldn't need to do any more than that because it's not going to carry a cost or affect any of my vendors. It's not going to change the contract total. But like I said, we're going to walk through a customer change example today and show you all the possible steps. So just keep in mind that each situation is going to be different. You may find scenarios where you need all the steps or somewhere you're going to skip certain steps. So other things I can fill in here, I have the ability to list performance constraints the same way I did with a brand new project. I can go ahead and list things like we're using union labor only, work can only occur during these hours. Maybe when work is not in session, we could go ahead and be upgrading the lobby tile, right? Whatever we want to list here that's pertinent for our vendors to know. This is going to show, again, remember on all of our requests for quote and in the plan room. Work description here, we can go ahead and be as general or as detailed as we want in terms of what this change entails. So I'm going to go ahead and say upgrading lobby tile in building 1. Right, and I can always edit this later. Also keep in mind that this work description can be included as the scope of work section on the proposal. Now from here, I can move on either by clicking next step or by simply clicking the step on the left that I want to go to. So don't feel like you have to click next 3 times to get where you want to go. You can simply go ahead and click down to the step that's next applicable to you. Now we're going to go next to affected vendors. This will be the only step that doesn't look familiar to you in terms of pre-construction processes. All the rest of these you'll be familiar with from your standard pre-construction. Affected vendors is going to be listing for you all of the vendors and cost codes with whom you have existing commitments. That means if I have subcontracts and purchase orders already written in my buyout tab for this project, I'm going to see those affected vendors here. It's going to list all cost codes that I have buyouts for. It's going to list the applicable vendor name and the cost category, labor, materials, equipment, subcontract, other. This is allowing me to check a box next to each vendor's name or each cost code. I'm going to see a checkbox here where I can check the box to say, yes, this vendor is going to be affected. That means if I have a flooring subcontractor in here who's going to be handling the lobby tile, and I know that I'm going to need to gather new pricing from them in terms of the cost of that upgraded tile or new installation costs, I would want to check the box next to their subcontract and their cost code. This does 2 things for me in terms of saving me time. It's going to take that cost code that I've checkboxed as applicable, and it's going to drop it into the cost estimate automatically in step 4 so that I make sure I don't miss it or grab an incorrect similar cost code when I'm building my estimate for the change. The second thing it's going to do is take that vendor's name and build them a quote or a request for quote, in step 5 so that I can have a ready-made email. When I get to step 5, all I'll have to do is commit that email and send it out to the vendor to ask for their pricing on this change. So I don't have to select anybody in step 2, but if I do, it's going to save me time in steps 4 and 5. Now you can see we don't have any current vendors with commitments for this project. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. But if we did, we could check those boxes right here. I'm going to stop at this moment just to see if we happen to have any questions at all.
We do have just one. Would affected vendors only include committed commitments or also open quotes and draft commitments?
You know, that's a fabulous question. I might have to actually test that to be sure. My suspicion is that it's only going to include committed, but we'll go ahead and note that down. And I will follow up with you right after the webinar to make sure I get you an answer there. I just wanted to double check it.
Awesome.
Anything else at the moment?
Looks like that is it for right now, Sarah.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. Okay, so next stop, everyone, is plans and specifications. This is going to be identical to the original plans and specs page that you used when you created your project and uploaded your first set of plans and specs. So I'm not going to belabor the whole process here. You probably saw that in our pre-construction webinars or in training videos that you've been through. But what we're going to do here is just upload a document so that I can show you the supersede function. Now, the important thing to note here in terms of why I would use a change to update plans and specs is because if my project is in progress, I can no longer use the addendums feature. So if you are used to heavily using the addendums feature when you're in the request stage of your project, you'll know that that feature locks out when you hit proposal or in progress stages. So if I want to update original plans and specs later on in the project, this is the place to do it. And it's going to give you that same supersede option that you see with the addendums feature. So if I come in here and add a file, we're going to go ahead and say our version is going to be change 01. I could put in whatever version name or number I want. I'm going to go ahead and say I'll name my own files because I'm just going to bring in a single PDF here. And I'm going to grab a PDF file here. Once we bring that in, we're going to have the same process of reviewing and committing this file that we would on any other plans and specs page. And again, if you're bringing in a large number of files, it may take a few moments for that file to upload. Don't feel like you have to stay on this page. In fact, this is a great moment to demonstrate that if I back out at any point in this change process, as long as I filled in step 1, this proposal will be saved as a potential customer change here in the contract tab. So I could go do other things, go get lunch, come back. I'm going to get an email when my files are finished uploading. And I can come right back in here and click edit and go back to plans and specs right here. Now I can see my files ready for review. It's the same process that you're used to, but you'll see this supersede option that is familiar to anyone who's used addendums. This allows me to choose if this drawing should be replacing any of my existing plans and specs. So this dropdown will include all of your committed plans and specs, and you'll be able to either scroll through or search. You can type up here in the search feature to get the right document to pop to the top. That way you don't have to scroll through hundreds of files. As I click on this one, it's going to go ahead and copy the number and name. And what's going to distinguish this copy from the older copy is going to be the version name or number and the date. So that supersede is key there if you're replacing an older copy. As I save that reviewed file, it's still going to be a draft so that if I need to make changes, I can. But note that we're going to get this message here that says superseded by my authorized scope 00 version, right? Dated in September of 2023. So right now, this copy is not superseding the older copy because the change isn't authorized yet. It's just a potential change. So even if I go ahead and commit this, which by the way, I will need to commit all plans and specs in order to finalize the proposal and send it out. Even once I commit this, it is not replacing the older copy until we authorize the change. So what we would be seeing in the plan room or in the mobile app right now would be both copies of this document FLI, right? I would be seeing the existing copy from September as under the heading current plans. I would be seeing the new copy under a separate heading for potential changes. And in fact, we can go take a look at that if we view the plan room for this project, because they will appear side by side here in the plan room and in the mobile app until such time as we authorize. You can see current plans up top. They'll have a separate section for potential scope change 01. That way, this file is accessible even before the change is authorized, but it's not until we authorize the proposal that this file will actually replace the older one in the current plans section. So that's important to keep in mind. Let's come back in here and move along to our next step. And again, remember, you can continue to add affected vendors and plans and specs throughout this request process, right? The same way you can with any project, any original project. As long as it's in request stage, all of these pre-construction steps are editable. So we're going to proceed down to our cost estimate, step 4. Again, it's not listed as optional, but if there's no cost change with regards to this potential change, you can leave this blank. It's okay if your change has a $0 value. Another scenario where your change might have a $0 value would be if you're putting through a customer change to authorize the use of owner's contingency. Sometimes I'll see clients do that where they will have a negative cost code, a negative cost for their owner's contingency cost code, and then a corresponding positive cost for flooring or whatever cost code may be appropriate. And the total value would still be 0, even though they'll have some costs listed in here if what they're doing is transferring money to a different cost code. So lots of ways you can utilize this. But the thing to keep in mind here is it's going to start out blank, and it's functional in exactly the same way as your original estimating feature. So again, we're not going to get into a ton of detail here, because if you've seen trainings or webinars on the cost estimate feature itself, it's the same here. What I do want to note is that if you choose an affected vendor in step 2, that cost code will already be here for you with a $0 value and the same assembly line items that you had in your original estimate. So if I had broken flooring down into 5 different assembly items, I would see flooring here and those same 5 assembly items. If I don't have any affected vendors, or I have costs that aren't associated with affected vendors, I can still come in here and add cost codes on my own. So I'm going to go ahead and search for flooring. And there we go. We've got a flooring cost code that I can add here. Once we bring that in, again, it's going to carry over. If you're pulling in a master assembly, you're going to see all those corresponding line items. Or if you're pulling something in from affected vendors, you're going to see the same assembly items from the original estimate. Here, I'm going to keep it simple with a tile line and an installation line. We're going to go ahead and put both of these under subcontract. There you are. And we're going to go ahead and adjust the quantity to 1. I'm going to go ahead and leave these as lump sums, but again, remember, you can change your unit of measure and your quantities as you see fit. We're going to say we're estimating $5,000 for a new tile and $7,500 for installation. We can put in as many costs as we need, build it out the same way we would an original estimate. All of your supplemental markups, if you used any, will carry over from the original estimate here into the change estimate. You can, of course, remove them if needed, but it's going to go ahead and copy those over. You can see I had liability in there as 5% of total price. Down here, it's going to carry your type of proposal based on the original estimate, unless you've set in your preferences, right? Your project preferences, you can actually set your preferred type of proposal for changes. So if you say, hey, it's common for us to do construction management style changes, or we anticipate that all changes for this project will be construction management versus fixed price or T&M, we can set that in step 2 of the project setup form, which would be project preferences. Otherwise, you can change it as you wish here. Again, remember, if it's construction management, you're going to get a chance to handle not only the fee percentage, but also all of your overhead percentages by cost category. And keep in mind that if you're not happy with how the total price or the fee amount is coming out based on this percentage of total cost or total price here, you can always type into the total price section and say, hey, I'd rather enter my fee as a dollar value. I can go ahead and type in, hey, I'd like this to be $15,000, and that will update and backfill. So let's go ahead and do that. Right, you can see as I enter that, it's going to backfill now a fee of $17.50 to make sure we achieve that total price of $15,000. Okay, looks like we've got one quick question here. Why would
Yeah,
you need the installation? You're correct, Todd. You could absolutely use a labor category line item. It just depends. I see some clients who want it all under subcontract because they're going to write a single subcontract for it, and that's how they want it in the budget. But you would want to match up here with how you budgeted it, right? So if you're planning on writing a labor PO, you might want to put that under the labor category. If you're buying the tile from a supplier, you might put this under materials. You're absolutely right. Those categories could change based on your preferences. So, okay. From here, we're going to go ahead and move forward. If you have any other estimating questions, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A. Our next stop is going to be vendor quotes. And again, we don't have to use vendor quotes. If we don't need to gather any pricing, that's fine. We can move past this step. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that there's now kind of two options for how this step is going to play out. What you're seeing here is the traditional RFQ process in which we would send out invites per cost code. That's what we've historically had available. But if you are already utilizing our new bid leveling feature, whereby you can create bid packages here on the estimate page, the same bid leveling features are going to be available. So if you've enabled bid leveling for your project and you're using that new estimate, you're going to have the ability to add bid packages right here. You'll see that add bid packages option, and then you would be able to navigate and edit your bid packages right over here. If you're not using bid leveling yet, then your step would be to go here to vendor quotes and generate requests for quote by cost code. Again, remember, bid leveling is allowing you now to generate requests for quote by bid package, which may include multiple cost codes. So I know we've got some clients using each feature. If you have additional questions about how those processes work, feel free to reach out to us. But we're not going to get into super great detail because, again, these should function the same way as they do in your original pre-construction. Suffice it to say that this is the point where you would send out those requests for quote. You'd gather any pricing you need, and that could be from affected vendors, right? If I selected an affected vendor in step 2, I would already see a ready-made RFQ for that vendor and that cost code here in step 5. If I didn't select any affected vendors, I might say I need to go ahead and bid out this flooring change, and I could invite 4 or 5 different flooring contractors to see what their pricing is and who I'd like to go with. So it's up to you. Again, you don't have to utilize this step at all if you don't need to gather any pricing, and if you don't need to send out invitations. You have this unsolicited quotes option. You've always got the option to say, hey, I already have quotes on hand. Let me go ahead and upload them into the system, and I can then compare and choose the ones that I want. Do keep in mind that whether you're using our legacy RFQ process or our new bid leveling feature, both have that select as best capability where you can actually select the quote you plan on using, and that will allow you down here in the change proposal to include a copy of that quote in the proposal document out to your customer. It's also going to tailor your cost estimate. So if you select as best a quote that is $4,500 for tile instead of $5,000, that's going to update your cost estimate from $5,000 down to $4,500. So a very useful feature there. Next stop is going to be schedule of values. This is a mini SOV for this change only. And just like our original master SOV for the project, the only rule on how this should be built out is that when I'm done, the gray total must match the orange total penny for penny. Now, this is listed as optional. You do not have to build your schedule of values at this moment, but let me kind of explain the pros and cons. If I don't like to see new line items on my schedule of values for change orders, I may choose not to build anything here. If I don't need to send a schedule of values with the proposal, I may not need to build it here. If I don't choose to build a schedule of values for this change here, what I need to know is that I need to build into my workflow. After we authorize this change, we need to go to the master SOV for the project, and we need to manually add in that new $15,000 worth of value into the existing line items. So that being said, if you don't want to have multiple flooring line items on your customer bill, you might choose not to build anything here. But just know that there won't be any reminders after the fact. If you authorize the change, there's no built-in reminder process to tell you you need to go to the master SOV and add $15,000 to the flooring line item. The benefit of building it here and now is that it will automatically push to the master SOV when you authorize the change. So if I go ahead and build it here, I don't have to remember to add it later. It would automatically add it to the master SOV, and it will automatically start showing up on the bill the moment the change is authorized. Again, the downside to that is that whatever new line items you build here will be added in as new separate line items on your master SOV and therefore on your customer bill. Again, there's many ways to slice this. So I'm going to go ahead and build an SOV. We'll show you how that comes out and how to kind of condense that down into your existing line items later if you want to. But I think this is just a good kind of best practice place. If you're willing to build it out here, unless there's a good reason for you not to, this can really save you some headache down the road. So I'm going to go ahead here and import my SOV from the estimate for this change, meaning from step 4. That's the quickest and easiest method. It's useful for folks who like to see their SOV broken down by cost code or by cost division. If you like to break your SOVs down in a different method, you could choose to import it from a spreadsheet or build it line by line. But if we pull it in from the estimate, we're kind of guaranteed that we're not going to miss anything and that the totals are going to match. So I can go ahead and say, hey, I want one line item per cost code. I do or do not want the cost code number included in the description. And then remember, allocation method is simply asking you, do you want the customer to see separate overhead and fee lines, or do you want those overhead and fee charges kind of smoothed in across the other direct cost line items? It's up to you. I'm going to say no allocation so you can see what that looks like. If you allocate out indirect costs, your overhead costs will be spread across existing line items, and you will still have a separate fee line. If you allocate both, you won't see an overhead or a profit line. They will be spread across other line items. So let's hit continue. Also keep in mind that if you use an import feature and you don't like what you see, as long as this is in request stage, you can re-import this as many times as you want to get it to look the way that you want. Notice here, I have my overhead and my profit listed separately. If I chose to allocate those out, this $1,750 would be added up here to the flooring line. It would not be spread across supplemental markup lines, but it would be spread across any direct cost code line items. Again, note that these two match penny for penny. That is crucial because if they don't, and we authorize the change and we start billing, we could be overbilling or underbilling the customer based on what's agreed to in the contract. And again, remember, if you come in here and make a change, feel free to make manual edits. Just because you import doesn't mean you can't make changes. Maybe I want to remove the overhead line, or I want to combine a couple of line items, anything like that. I can come in and make manual changes after an import. It's just that if I get off of the totals, I will see this warning up top. There's a difference of 1 penny between the total SOV and the revised contract amount. If I see this warning, I do not want to bill until I've corrected it, because a penny is pretty small, right? But I've seen plenty of clients with thousands of dollars of differences between their total SOV and their revised contract amount, and they're still billing, which means they're overbilling or underbilling the customer by the time they get to 100% completion. So very important to watch out for that. We'll also talk about some common ways you can end up with this error as we authorize this change here. Okay, so next stop is going to be the last one. This is our change proposal. Now that I've built out all the pieces, the same way I do in general pre-construction processes, it's time for me to decide how the proposal document should appear and what specifically should be included. I can see my proposal format. You may have generally, you're going to have just one proposal format for each type of proposal, that being fixed price, construction management, or T&M. You do have the ability to create additional formats in the configuration menu if you want, and you may be able to pick from those various formats so that you can send the right document for the right situation. Proposal date defaults to today, but you can push forward or backward as needed with the calendar. Linking to the estimate here. This is called the scope of work section. 9.5 times out of 10, if you created an estimate in step 4, you are going to want this linked to estimate, right? The only reason you would unlink from estimate would be for those quick, simple changes. Generally, when I see people using this, it's because they have a time constraint. They really need to get the proposal out right now. They don't have time to finish building out the estimate or certain other pieces. Unlink from estimate will allow you to simply type in your own proposed change total. It will lock out the estimate feature and you won't be able to use it. So that's, again, key. If you built an estimate, you want to stay linked to estimate because we're going to push that total through for you. Note that your profit margin shows here. That's internal. It's not going to show on the proposal. It's just for your information. You are going to see your scope of work section here. Another benefit to being linked to the estimate is that I can choose to pull in my scope of work from the estimate by cost division, by cost code, or by assembly with narrative. If I choose unlink from estimate, the only option I will have is work description, which is that description I typed in up in step 1. I could edit it here and get into more detail. If you'd like to have your scope of work typed out in a paragraph format, you can do that right here. We're going to go ahead and go by cost code. Again, note that if it's important to me to see items listed differently than the way they've been imported, I can edit a particular line item and go ahead and put a different title in there. Down here, you've got value added tax. So if you are utilizing any value added tax, you'll see your available tax rates. If you don't see any options, that's because they haven't been built out in the configuration menu for your company yet. You'd want to talk to your administrators about getting those set up. Down here, we've got our proposal expiration. Defaults to 30 days. You can update it as you wish. Time and punch duration impact. These are required fields, but that doesn't mean you have to track them. If you don't want to list any time, you can put zeros here. That's fine, but it will require you to have something in these fields before you can commit pricing. So we're going to go ahead and say this is going to add 2 days to the project overall and 1 day to our punch duration. Comments section here is internal. Again, important to note, these won't show on the proposal. This is just for your team's tracking purposes. Add clarifications and alternates. We've got our default list of clarifications. Your administrators can customize this list for you if there's things you use often, so that you can simply check the box. Or you can add your own clarifications or alternates right here. Down at the bottom, you've got that same standard list of one-click attachments. The only differences are that if I choose to include my plans and specs, it's going to ask me if I want to include all of them or only the ones for this change. If I check this box, we're only including the items uploaded in step 3. If the box is unchecked, we're including all plans and specs, both from step 3 and from the original plans and specs page for the project. Schedule of values is including just the SOV from step 6, not the complete SOV for the project, or what I generally refer to as the master SOV. It's just the SOV for this change. And notice you can go back and edit it here. Selected vendors, anyone that I selected as best in step 5. If I check the box, it's going to include a copy of their quote. So it's essentially going to show my customer for the flooring cost code, this is the vendor I chose. Here's a hyperlink to their quote, if that's a level of visibility that you need to provide to your customer. Unit prices will always be available. And then these last two, negotiated pricing summary and negotiated pricing detail, are going to be available only for construction management style changes. Any other attachments, if you don't see a checkbox for it up above, feel free to add it right here. If there's anything else that should go out with your change proposal, you can drag and drop those files right here. They're going to appear on the last page of the proposal as a list of hyperlinks for your customer to view. If you have a change ID that your customer is using to track this change, you can put that in here. If you have a contract date, you can enter that. You don't have to fill these in if you don't need to. We want to go ahead and hit save every time we make changes. And again, we can come and go. Come back here and make as many changes as needed over a period of time. And at whatever point that we believe this may be ready to send out, the first thing we'll want to do is view the proposal. You can view the form you're going to be sending before you commit the pricing so that if you need to make any edits, you can go back and do so. So here's our draft. You can see that draft watermark letting us know. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit for you. So this is our change proposal. It's going to look pretty similar to the original proposal document that you send out for fixed price or for construction management. It's going to include basic details of the project. It's going to include your scope of work section here. It's going to include the total price. And if you chose to put in an impact to the project duration or the punch duration, you would see that here. If you put in zeros, this section that I've highlighted would say TBD, to be determined. Clarifications and alternates listed here, any expiration, and a list of your attachments. We'll have a signature space for acceptance, and then as we come down here, you're going to have a page for plans and specifications. You would see all of those included, and then you would see your schedule of values as a separate page. So we're going to include all of that information as you've requested it. If you like the way this looks, you can go ahead and commit it and send it out. If you don't, you can go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and make any other changes you need. Let's bring this back out. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and commit pricing on this, and then we're going to talk about how to authorize. But are there any questions at the moment?
I don't have any on the board right now.
Perfect. All right. So next stop then, right? This is now in a proposal status. That lets me know that the proposal document for this potential change is committed. In order to send this out, I've got a couple of options. I can hit the document icon and email out that proposal by itself. My customer can sign off. I can come here to the tools icon and authorize. However, most of my clients are utilizing our change order summary document, even just to send a single change. One of the major reasons is because we offer an AIA style change order. So if that's something you need, you're certainly going to want to wrap this proposal into a change order. The other reason is that if you have multiple changes, so we said this was upgrading the lobby tile in building 1, maybe we've got other changes to building 1 that we've built out. We have 3 or 4 potential changes and we'd like to send them all at once. We can group them into a single change order document. So to do that, I would check the box next to 1 or more potential customer changes, and then we would hit create potential change order. So again, I could include 1 or 100 different potential changes. As long as they're all in proposal status, they're ready to be wrapped into a potential change order. This process is much quicker and simpler than creating the overall change proposal, right? All I'm doing here is filling out this single page. I need to give it a PCO, name or number, potential change order, name or number. I'm going to call it 01, dated today, format. You're going to see a couple of different formatting options. We have a couple of additional in here because it's our training database and we tend to kind of test out unusual things. But really what you guys are going to be seeing is these 2 AIA style options, the current and the prior to 2001 option. And then you're going to see the standard format, which is not AIA. That's kind of a letter format. If you need to create any other formats, please reach out to us for assistance. But generally, what I see is folks using the change order 2001 version, right? That G701. Your project manager is already listed. And then your request name and narrative is just an option for you to summarize, right? In this case, it's probably going to be upgrading lobby tile with a narrative of, what we're doing and why. But if I was including 6 different changes, I might want to give it a name that helps my customer understand why I grouped these together. Building 1 changes, and then I would explain all changes included here. Right, I can get as detailed as I want. You've got some standard options for signatories down here. So we will by default include a signature line for the architect, the contractor, which is you, and the owner. You have the ability here to adjust the titles for each of your other signatories. So if you want this to say senior architect instead of architect, if you want this to say president and CEO instead of owner, anything that you need to change, you can go ahead and adjust those titles, and then you can choose who is the right person. So who on my team is my architect? Who is my owner? I pick my customer company and I pick the right person from that company. Then down at the very bottom, and I would scroll down if I had more changes, but at the very bottom, you're going to see a list of all your changes. And if I had 10 different changes, this would be an opportunity for me to make sure that I didn't include anything I didn't mean to. So I could uncheck the box if I included a certain change by mistake. So let's go ahead and save that. And then we'll go ahead and view it. Again, once it's saved, I recommend viewing it before committing it, just in case you need to make any changes. You'll see this is a very different format. It's going to be a single page. This is the AIA style, that G701 document. And what it's doing is it's summarizing all the changes that I've included. In this case, just one change. But if I had 10 of these, I would see all 10 changes, the number of days and dollars they're adding to the contract, and a summary of the overall effect on the contract total. I'm also going to see a hyperlink here. Don't feel like you're losing out on any detail, because this is a link to the full proposal that we just viewed. So this allows them to open up that full change proposal we just built with all the attachments and details. As we scroll down, you've got signature space, as we said, architect, contractor, and owner. And then down at the bottom, you've got the narrative and the list of changes included with those descriptions. So from here, we're going to go ahead and commit this change order. Again, that just means finalizing it so that we're not making any more edits. We're ready to send it out. And once that loads, oh, there we go. We have the ability then to send it out. You go ahead and click the document to view it and hit the email button. You also have the ability to send these out via DocuSign if you're integrated with DocuSign. You can open the little expand option here to see all of the individual changes underneath this overall change order. Now, a numbering system that I want to point out. Each individual change gets its own scope number. So you may hear us in various videos talking about the scope or the scope number. The original contract is identified in every project as scope 00. Each individual change that you make gets a sequential scope number, scope 01, scope 02, etc. This allows you to track your budget by scope and to understand how money is moving through your budget based on the original contract budget or a change order budget. So we'll see that play out in a moment. The ID over here is for the change order. Each change order has its own PCO name or number, or once it's authorized, a CO name or number. But the scope number is for the individual change proposal itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark this potential change order authorized. Notice you do have a cancel or avoid option if it's not approved or if you don't need to send it out. Once we authorize, a couple of things are going to happen. It wants to know the date this was authorized. And you'll note here that it's giving me the chance to choose which scope changes were authorized. If I sent 10 of these to the customer and they only authorized 7, I could indicate which 3 items were not approved, and that would not add them to the contract total. In this case, I only have 1, so it's not letting me deselect that. I have to approve at least 1 in order to authorize. Schedule of values here. This is important because this is your final chance to dictate how these line items should look before they're added to the master SOV and therefore to the bill. So what I'm seeing here is that those 4 different line items that I built for that potential change for flooring are in here. They're identified as part of change order 001. and part of potential change, scope 01. So the way this could potentially look, if I had 5 different potential changes, 5 different scopes, each with 5 line items, I could end up with 25 new line items here headed to my master SOV into my bill. That can get complicated quick. And if you don't want to see 25 new line items showing up on the bill for the customer, this is your chance to make some manual edits. You can delete and combine line items. This combine button here is actually going to condense everything down into a single line item. But you can also kind of manually combine into a smaller number of line items. You can also add additional line items here if you want to split things out in a different way. This is just kind of your final chance to make edits to how this should look before we add it to the bill. Again, you want to make sure that when you're done, this total matches this total up here penny for penny. I'm going to go ahead and hit combine items so you can see how that works. This is going to bring it down to a single line item titled change order 001. That way we know there's a new line item on the bill, but we're not getting into any more detail than that. Next, we've got attachments. This is where you would go ahead and upload any of those signed proposals. So we would come in here, we'll pretend this one is our signed document. We can dictate which scope it belongs to. So you can upload proposal documents related to each of the individual scopes that you included in this change order. Go ahead and put in a description. And then we can go ahead and upload. We can add up to 100 files here, so you should have plenty of space. And then the confirmation is just telling us that this potential change order has now been converted to a change order. So we're going to go ahead and close that form. And now what we're going to see is the heading authorized customer changes. So you would actually see maybe multiple headings here in the contract tab. You could see authorized and a separate heading for potential customer changes. You might see separate headings for authorized internal changes or potential internal changes. So we'll section all of those out and allow you to keep track of them that way. Once a customer change is authorized, you're going to see that it adds to the contract total. So this is my new contract total. An important thing to keep in mind is that as I authorize a change, this new value and those line items I dictated gets pushed to the master SOV. If I need to make a correction, remember anything in RedTeam that can be done can be undone. It just takes having the right permission. So if I'm an administrator and we need to deauthorize this change because we made an error, deauthorizing will not pull those line items back off of the SOV. So one common way that I've seen folks end up with major differences like this between their master schedule of values and their revised contract amount is they would deauthorize a change, fix it, and reauthorize, and they would end up, without knowing it, adding this $15,000 to their SOV twice. So the line items would be duplicated. The SOV is going to be in excess of the contract total by $15,000. If you have an error like this, that's one of the first recommendations I have is to come back here to the contract tab and see if the difference matches one of your authorized changes. If it does, you just want to take a look and make sure you didn't possibly duplicate those line items. So that being said, let's go take a look at how authorizing this change has affected our budget and our schedule of values. It automatically pushes all of the costs from that cost estimate we built into the budget here. So now we see flooring right here, $12,500, subcontract line item. However, if we already had a flooring budget for the original contract, we might see $40,000 here, and we'd be wondering how much of that $40,000 is from the original contract and how much is from a change order. If we want to split that out, we can come here to filter and group by scope. This is useful if you need to see your costs split out, original contract up top, and then you'll get a separate blue heading for each authorized scope change. And it's going to tell you this change was included in change order 001. So I can now see I had $12,500 in flooring costs and $750 in liability. Now my schedule of values. If we come here to our schedule, our master schedule of values for the project. Now, I don't think this project has one built yet. Yeah, I can see we haven't actually gone through that trading yet. So we haven't built the SOV for this project. But assuming we had, you can see this line item has been added to the master SOV. So in this case, the difference of negative 41,000 is because we haven't built the original estimate into, or the original budget into the SOV. It's yet to be built, but it's adding that line item automatically. Now, keep in mind, if you didn't write an SOV for your change, it won't add anything at all here. If you didn't tell it what line items to add, it won't add any. So that's where, like we said, if you skip that SOV step in the creation of the potential change, you would want to come here after authorizing and add in that value. You might edit your existing flooring line item and add in $15,000 worth of value. It's up to you. But that is one way to do it. I've seen some clients who absolutely do not want to see new line items as changes are authorized, and they may do it that way. Just depends on your workflows. But that is really all we have for owner changes. We're going to spend our last 10 minutes here taking a quick peek at how to create a subcontract change. But does anyone have any questions at the moment?
I think we're good. We did have a question earlier, which might be good just to address with everybody, is the recording for this afterwards, and where that could be located. So I let Kathy know that that's going to be on the Red Team page under the events tab, just in case you do need access to that.
Absolutely. We'll be posting that recording shortly afterwards. And if you need any other assistance or anything like that, feel free to reach out to Ashley or myself with any follow-up questions. Okay, so then last stop for today is going to be the buyout tab. We're going to talk about how to create a subcontract change. Now, I want to preface this by saying with our default subcontract and purchase order items, right? So if we come in here, the default subcontract and purchase order forms that are in here when you first start using your database, we have generally turned on the ability to create change orders for subcontracts, not for purchase orders. That being said, that's essentially a switch you can flip for any of your existing commitment forms. It can be altered in the configuration menu. There's an option to allow change orders. So if you find yourself writing change orders for purchase orders or for certain subsets of your subcontracts, you can turn that setting on for any of your commitment forms. I'm going to create a very quick subcontract agreement so that I can then create a change order, because we don't have one on this project already. So we'll go ahead and create a subcontract and then create a change to it. And what you're going to see here, in fact, it's kind of nice that you're getting a look at how to build an original subcontract really quick, because the steps to create a change order are going to be identical. We'll call this our plumbing subcontract. See if we don't have a plumbing cost code. We'll call this masonry then. Masonry services, we'll build it under masonry. Your subcontracts are, of course, generally falling under the subcontract cost category. Make sure we've got all this filled out. There we go. Again, just creating a quick subcontract so that you can see how to create a change. We'll call this one $10,000. And I'm going to go ahead and waive all of our credentials here so that doesn't hold us up in committing this. And we'll go ahead and commit it. So if I have an existing committed or executed subcontract on my project, I can come in here to the buyout tab at any point in time and create a change order. There are many reasons why you might create a change order. Probably the most logical follow-on to what we've been seeing today is, for example, if I had a flooring subcontract already in here and I processed an owner change, I may then come in and create a follow-on vendor change to that flooring subcontract. But you can see here, once it's committed, it doesn't even have to be in an executed status. Once it's committed, you have the ability to create change orders. Creating a change order could be in relation to an owner change, but it doesn't have to be. I might have accidentally left something out when I wrote the original subcontract. I might be processing a change order because unexpected circumstances came up and costs are increasing. I might be processing a negative change order if I'm receiving a credit from that vendor. So all of those scenarios would lead you to come here, click the tools icon, and hit create change order. You're going to see these are exactly the same steps I just went through to fill out the original subcontract. The difference is that most of the information is already filled in for me. And I also want to note that if you've collected a quote, this is only for those who are still using the legacy RFQ feature. If you've collected a quote for a single cost code and it's on file, you can come up here and say, hey, I have an $8,500 quote for masonry on file. I want to use that on this change order. And what that's going to do is populate this $8,500 quote into step 3, breaking it down into the same line items that were used on your estimate. You don't have to include quotes. And in fact, if you're using bid leveling, we don't have this feature available currently. It's something that they're still working on as part of phase 2 of our bid leveling feature. But nice to know it's here if you're someone who's still using those old RFQ processes. Contract terms would already be filled out for me based on the original subcontract. But there is a key piece I want you to pay attention to, and that's the scope. This is very important to make sure that things fall into the correct spot in your budget. If the money for this subcontract change should be pulled from the original contract budget, then the answer here is original. If this is a change that is related to that upgrading lobby tile change, I want to select scope 1. You can choose any change from the contract tab that is either potential or authorized. It does not have to be authorized yet for me to start writing a follow-on subcontractor change. So if I know I'm going to write a subcontractor change to my flooring sub and I don't have the authorization on the owner change yet, I can still be prepping that change order document as a draft and then send it out once the change is authorized. But the key piece here is that if I don't pick the right scope, I'm going to start to see some misalignment of actual costs in my budget, because it won't be falling under where I budgeted the money. Everything else should largely remain the same. You can go ahead and double check it. Products and services here is where you'll fill out exactly what's being covered by this change. So we can go ahead and say extended border wall. We can describe the change in services here in as much detail as we want. Remember, you can have multiple line items. I'm just going to create one, but you could have a dozen different line items here, depending on the level of detail you want to get into. You can calculate each of those as a lump sum. I'm going to say $2,500. But I could also check this box if I prefer to calculate it using quantity and unit of measure and unit price. Also notice that in my case, I have the ability to select a different cost code for each line item. This is again a setting that you can turn on for any of your commitment forms, because in some cases we have clients who say the cost code I pick in step 2 is the only cost code we will use. My subcontracts only ever cover one cost code. If you're someone who routinely writes subcontracts or purchase orders that may span multiple cost codes, that's a setting you can turn on, and you'd be able to adjust the cost code for each individual line item here. We're going to hit save. We're going to make sure we've added all our items and they look the way we want. Again, remember, we have some optional steps here to help us out, verifying whether we still require any documentation from the vendor, any credentials. If you see anything here that's not on file, you can go ahead and reach out to them to collect it. You can also add additional documents that you may need before you authorize this subcontract change, you can go ahead and add them here. And you'll see whether it's on file or not. Again, you have the ability to upload it here, or if you have the correct permissions, you can waive it, which means normally we would require it, but in this situation, we're willing to move forward and make an exception. Just a reminder stage. Same with submittals. If you want to list any required submittals, this is going to allow you to create additional submittals items that will drop into your submittals tab. Otherwise, you'll be seeing any existing submittal items for the applicable cost codes listed here. So you can see what's required, and it's going to go ahead and list those on the change order for the sub so that they know what items are required. Attachments here, we're going to attach any quote. If you choose to use a quote, we'll attach a copy of it down here. We're going to attach plans and specs for you as needed. And then if there's anything else you want to send out with this document, you can go ahead and drag and drop it here. Last step is, of course, confirmation. And I always advocate taking a look through to make sure this is going to fall into the correct spot in your budget. Do I have the right scope? Do I have the right cost code? Is the total correct? And do I have all my credentials? Just a really nice quick double check. And then we can view the document before we authorize. Always recommend viewing it in a draft status so that if you see anything that doesn't look right, it's very quick and easy to go back and make changes. You'll see that this is going to be formatted a lot like your original subcontract form. The difference is we're going to cut out all that terms and conditions legal language because it was already agreed to in the original subcontract. So you're going to see the contract terms up here. You're going to see that scope of work or schedule of values section, signature space, and then a list of any plans and specs and any attachments down here. So pretty simple format. If you're happy with it, you commit it and email it out or send it out via DocuSign. If you're not, you've got the pencil to go back and make edits. Once you commit this, it effectively becomes a piece of the original subcontract. So if I go ahead and commit it, again, remember, every time I commit a new buyout, I'm going to get that pop-up that we saw earlier asking me if I want to adjust my at-risk. This is my manual forecasting. I definitely don't want to ignore all these reminders, right? When this pops up, it's telling me you budgeted $22,300 for masonry. You've already committed $12,500. How much do you still expect to spend? Right? And I can edit this down. I could say I'm done spending. I'm not going to spend any more. Or I could give it my real life estimate of what we still expect to spend between now and the end of the project that has not been committed yet. In this case, I'm going to say foot to budget and say that I still plan to come in right on budget. That's not always the case though, right? I don't want you to get in the habit of just clicking this button because it's simple and easy. This is really your opportunity to give a real life estimate of what is still out there that has not been accounted for with actual costs or open commitments yet. But it will, keep in mind, it will let you move right past this step without making any changes. And if you continue to do that, you will start to show falsely over budget on your financial reports, and you're going to be wondering why. And it's because you're double counting that money. I just added $25,000 or $2,500 to my open line of my budget, and I didn't remove it from my at-risk. So I'll start showing falsely over budget. From here, these two items are one subcontract. How do I know if a line item in the buyout tab is original or a change? This white space here is a dead giveaway because it doesn't have its own subcontract number. It doesn't have its own vendor or employee. It's nested right underneath the parent subcontract. I can tell that this is modification 01 of the original subcontract up above it. You could have 3, 4, 5 change orders on the same subcontract. There's nothing to prevent that. They will all be invoiced as a whole. So whether I come to this one or this one down the road and say I want to create a vendor invoice, I'm going to be invoicing against a single subcontract with a total of $12,500. So you won't invoice them separately, even though they appear separately here. This just allows you to access the original subcontract documentation and the change order document. But with that, I think that's all we have for today. I apologize for running you a couple of minutes over, but are there any last questions that we should answer?
Yeah, just one more, Sarah. The description that you write on step 3, is that able to be viewed on this manage buyout commitment screen anywhere? Or are you able to filter for or view that at all?
So not on this main overview screen that I'm aware of. It's really going to be limited to these available columns.
Okay.
You will see it on the printable copy. So any descriptions that I write will be shown here. But if you're looking for a description, your subject here is really, I think, what's going to be shown on the main screen. So you can see that description field here. I know it does say description, but really the field you're typing in is in step 2 when you type in the subject. That's what's actually showing here on this summary page. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And it looks like, Christian, you have your hand raised. Let me see. Okay, perfect. That should allow you to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you very much. So I see that in your form, in your change order form, you have an approval signature space, which we do not at the bottom.
Right here.
Yeah, so I always have to, just PDF it in. How do I turn that on?
If you actually just go ahead and reach out, you can send an email to myself or to implementation at redteam.com. Just go ahead and send us a request by email, and I'll see if our configuration team can help get that added in there for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be done from your, and in fact, I'll show you where, but we can help you out with it. Down here in configuration, if you're an administrator, you can actually come in and hit commitment forms and open up any of these. So we'll open up this subcontract agreement and hit edit. There's going to be a section all the way down in change orders, which is at the very bottom, where you can adjust contract language. So contract language footer here is going to be for your main subcontract. But as we come down to change order format, you'll have the same settings, and there'll be a space down here for footer. Basically, what we'll do for you is we'll come in here to the footer and we'll add a signature space like this. You could build it yourself if you wanted, but it's just as easy. If you want to, you can send us an email and we'll get that added in for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions before we wrap up?
Looks like we are good for now.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Great turnout today, so that makes me really happy. Be sure to keep an eye out for our next webinars. We are going to have some additional webinars as the year gets going, and we'd love to see you there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.